Well, hello, Leslie. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
I'm really excited about this. You know that we've talked over the last several weeks about really highlighting what you are about and your specialty and expertise. And today we are going to provide an overview of just that and our conversations that we've had. So today I'm joined by a special guest speaker, Leslie Nydick, who is the conflict strategist. Do you have workplace conflict? Well, Leslie's going to get you unstuck. We're going to cover a 5 step framework for mastering difficult conversations in the workplace that includes conflict management, conflict resolution, and communication. A little about Leslie. If you are an individual, a team, a manager, or a leader, Leslie will empower you with the proven strategies to approach conflict, navigate difficult conversations, and become a master negotiator. Her services include customized learning, coaching, consulting, and speaking. Leslie has a broad background in negotiation and conflict management that includes mediating business, workplace issues, arbitrating for the stock exchanges, court appointments as a neutral and coach, and developing leading training. She is a member of the adjunct faculty at New York University, teaches and develops course in conflict management, mediation, negotiation, and cross-cultural communication. Let's get started and uncover a few key strategies that can help you during a conflict, miscommunication, or a difference of perspective. So, take it away, Leslie. Let's get into what we've been so excited to talk about. And I know that you've got some helpful strategies and tips that can help us in our workplace environments.
Well, thank you. I think I want to mention where I got my experience.
Okay.
And my career started in facilities management, real estate, construction, and design. And as many of you in that field, you know that conflict just was part of the everyday, as it is in many workplaces. And I found that whether I was in between landlords and tenants, contractors, me versus a contractor, on the job site, negotiating leases, I just learned so much about what we can do differently with communication, which was kind of the opposite of what I was taught. And that's where so much of my experience now has come from. So when I wanted to go out on my own, I was looking at like, what did I love about my work? And it was the communication, or rather miscommunications, and the negotiation and learning how to manage conflict, and that it really could be an opportunity. So that's what we'll be talking about today. And one key thing to start, one strategy is we just said, hey, how to manage difficult conversations. So when we leave that word difficult in there, our mind starts to think about like, oh, there's something we don't look forward to. I don't want to do this. And we're kind of in a protect mode because why wouldn't we be? So I find that as silly or simple as this sounds, is that I'll say, oh, I'm going to have a conversation with someone. If I keep on repeating difficult, I'm going to want to avoid it. But if I just say to myself, I'm going to have a conversation, even though it might be difficult, even though it might be stressful, but keeping that mindset of like stripping it of those adjectives that put us in that negative mode. I don't know if that's something you've experienced, but that's where I always start.
Well, I am delighted for the you that you brought up the fact that your background is really in the construction industry. And as you know, both of us have been in the construction industry for many, many years. And there are so many moving pieces and parts and people and timelines and deadlines. There have been some difficult conversations that I've experienced. And the best thing about that is I know that you're going to be sharing more about the tips and strategies, but once you are able to learn those tips and strategies to overcome those difficult conversations where they become more meaningful conversations where they can add to a better future for you and your colleagues or teammate or actually your company. So thank you for adding that in. And yes, I love that you strip the adjectives and it becomes more objective. And I feel that people wouldn't be as defensive to get into that conversation with you. Great point.
Absolutely. Uh, I think the first one that helps us in any conversation, whether you consider it a conflict, whether it's just an everyday conversation, learning how to pause. We are always so quick to want someone asks a question, you want to respond. Well, if it's a really good question, you don't know the answer immediately. It's not like they're testing, like, how many years did you do this? What do you think of that? You have to think. A great question makes you think, and it's okay to pause. We don't have to fill up every empty, space in our conversation. And it gives us a chance to think. Now, sometimes we could think quickly. Sometimes we need a longer pause. I'll say, oh, wow, that's a really interesting question. Hmm. Off the top of my, I don't know the answer. That's my answer. I'm going to go think about it and get back to you tomorrow. And that's something I really learned on my first construction site. I had no idea what I was doing. And I was supposed to make a decision between what kind of electrical panel we were going to have. And everyone's looking at me, and I'm like, okay, I'll be right back. And I went and found this nice electrician
Mm.
who was just like, what do you need? I said, they're asking me what kind of panel. He's like, oh, okay, let me. And he loved it. He's like, let me teach you about these panels, why one would work better than the other. And luckily, that happened on my first project where I just knew, hey, I don't have to know everything. I have to know how to coordinate and find the right people who know what I don't know. So that probably combines like this whole pausing and knowing when you don't know. It's okay not to know. The smartest people in the room who are the ones who say, oh, I don't know about that, but I know who I'm going to go and ask.
Well, it definitely shows a level of maturity as well, and it feels safe. I was just guilty of not taking a pause when you asked me a question. Now even that we are on a time limit on our event, it's still important, as you said, to pause because if you're so quick to respond, the person on the receiving end maybe didn't feel heard.
Sure. That's a big one. Finding ways to make people feel heard. And especially if it's in the workplace and you're approaching someone because maybe there's an issue that you were upset about or they were upset about, pause, first of all. It doesn't have to happen right away, that conversation. Just because the thing that they said or you said just happened, it can be, hmm, what we have something important to talk about. Let's find a time to talk about it later. It gives both of you the pause to let the emotions calm down a bit without saying calm down. Um,
Well,
and it gives time to reflect. Like,
yes.
oh, wow, you know what? I really, up until today, I've always gotten along with this person. So obviously, something they said or I said, like, ticked us both off. So, well, let's remember the base that we have and let me assume positive intent. And that word assume can be a good thing for us and a bad thing because in the workplace, the amount of assumptions, whether people are assuming when someone wants something, what the due date is, they assume expectations, they assume what someone is able to do. We assume so many things, and those assumptions are quite often the foundation of conflict or difficult conversations. So it really goes back to we've got to talk to each other. And there's a great quote that I don't want to misquote. The single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Hmm.
And that was said by George Bernard Shaw. The workplace, maybe at the door, we need that, on the entry, like, hello, welcome, and then write that and remind people that we're so often assuming that everyone knows what we shared or said or wrote in an email. And we never go back to, hey, let me go ask. Hey, what'd you think of what I said, the project? What are your plans for how we're going to do this? And then you'll find out more about what they heard, interpreted, and that there needs to be some back and forth, not this one way communication. We need multi directional.
Definitely. One thing comes to mind when you speak of the pausing. Any great leader, speaker, committee, anybody that you've ever seen on television that you admire or want to learn from, they're not jumping in at every opportunity to answer the question or be so quick to have that conversation go fast. It adds such quality to the conversation, I feel. And I've learned something very very strong here today, that it's okay not to be the first person to answer the question. And I know you might talk about this too, where in, say, an office environment, a board meeting, don't be the first person to answer the question. It's okay to take a pause and not feed off that maybe nervous energy that you might have, perhaps, to answer that question too, which I'm very guilty of. I love that quote. I love the author, and thank you for sharing that. That was a great fit for this, definitely.
Yeah.
So we've got another strategy, and listen more. Focus on
This
what
is a
the
big
other
one.
person, right?
Yes. Um, Listen first. And people will always say, what do you mean listen first? Then I'm not going to get a chance to talk. If you give more, you'll get more back. And by the way, by giving more, I want to acknowledge, thank you, Scott, for being here, and Holly. They're both great friends of mine. So I appreciate your support in being here.
Uh,
I think what happens is I understand the workplace, whether you're working for the government, whether you're working for a university, a private company, a public company, a small company. I've been there, I've worked in all of them, and everyone's short of time. That pressure of time, though, makes us skip over things that we need to do. And or we try to multitask. So while I'm in a meeting and maybe the subject seems to not be related to me, so I'm looking at my phone or I'm writing notes to myself about a totally different topic. While I'm doing that, I'm not listening. And those meetings go on longer because of it. So it's this weird struggle of we don't have enough time. So we're trying to do a million things at the same time, but then we end up getting nothing done. So if someone's in front of you, listen, don't think about what you are going to have for dinner. Don't think about the project that you have to work on tomorrow. Don't think about anything else. Just listen, give the space to listen to them. And it's not easy. You have to
no.
practice that. I have to practice it. We all have to practice it. And don't practice it while you're in a tense situation because that's hard. Now you have too many things going on. You've got emotions, you may be upset, you have even less time to deal with this unexpected issue. Practice this with your friends. Practice this when you go to a store and ask a question. Just listen. You don't have to plan your response. You can take that pause to plan, to say your response. So that's a key thing, that listening is not something that just comes naturally. Active listening. We all know how to listen, but do we do it well? But I do hear it from people where they're like, "Well, I've been doing this all my life." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. We have some bad habits with listening." We do a lot of other things while we're listening. We need to listen to their voice, not the voice, in other words, that are in our head.
Great points. And that what you mentioned out in public, your kids. There was doing research for our meeting today. I had the opportunity to spend some time with my kids yesterday, and some of what they were talking about was not that interesting, but I wanted to make sure that I listened and I stopped. I put my stuff in my hands down and I made sure that I gave them the respect and my quality listening. And it was really neat experience and to be more mindful of that, to just listen and don't plan to react. And the yeah buts is one of my pet peeves when people do the yeah buts. That's probably one of the things I try not to do as well. But it's definitely to listen and pause. Great, great, great habits to implement.
The other thing that we tend to do, especially if someone's coming to us, let's say your manager, one of your team members is coming in. They're coming with an issue. They want your advice. You're making lots of assumptions about what they need from you. They start to mention something. Oh, you've already dealt with that kind of thing before. And you start like shooting out the response and how they can fix it. And you send them off on their way. And guess what? The problem doesn't get solved because what's happening to them is not what was happening to us. So we have to listen to their issue, even though it may remind us of something that happened to us. But what's happening to them is happening to them. And there's a totally different perspective and focus. And if we just tell people what to do and how to fix it, guess what?
Guess
The
what?
next time they have an issue, knock, knock, knock on the door, and they're back. So if we think, yes, it'll take some time to have the full conversation right then, but it won't take so much time the next time because we're teaching, we're showing, we're helping them figure out how to resolve their own issues and giving them like the confidence. And also sometimes the people need the permission. Oh, I thought I had to ask you how to do this. If I can try something and make a mistake and learn from it, it applies also to how you said, people might not feel comfortable speaking up. That's the issue, that mistakes usually cause blame in many organizations where they're looking at who's at fault. And I'm always like, who cares who was at fault? Let's just figure out what happened, how to address it, and change it for the future. So those blame-based organizations, of which I worked in quite often, uh, point to blame and never get to the point of like, hey, mistakes are good. If we didn't try that and fail, we wouldn't have known that that's not going to work for the long term. Now we're going to figure out what parts of it worked well and what didn't. And let's try another way that might not work all like 100%, but we're going to find another component of it that will work and we can keep on moving forward. And people want to speak up when they know it's okay. Like, hey, I discovered an issue, or I have a question about that. I'm not sure that that's our best option. Oh, really? What other idea do you have? Oh, I don't know if it's going to work. It doesn't matter if it's not going to work. Let's just try it. So that's a lot about how I work with teams to try to help them foster that speaking up.
Yeah. I love those tips too. And the first thing that comes to mind is trust. Not only are you helping your teammates or your colleagues or even your relationships build better communication styles and habits, you're building a trust that when somebody trusts that they can come into your office and have a quality conversation with you, that is priceless. How much time do we spend at work and amongst our colleagues? And isn't it nice when you have a colleague that you can actually trust and not email them, actually go over to their office and have great conversations. Take a couple minutes out of your day and keep depositing investments of time into that because they need it too. We're all human. We all appreciate being appreciated. So, thank you for that. So, our next
Absolutely.
strategy would be to ask better questions.
Yes. This one, and these are really not in order because asking better questions is a great place to start, and not while you're in the workplace having difficult conversations. Deal with this, like try this when you're with your friend, like I said, when you're in a store. Ask questions that make people think. Uh, if I just ask yes and no questions, and I'll give an example. I do a riddle type thing in some training, and I'll tell everyone a piece of a story. You can only ask me yes, no questions that require me to say yes, no. That's all you're allowed to ask. And what happens is they'll say, "Oh, is it this? Is it that? Did this happen? Did that?" And I'll answer yes or no. They'll go through 30 questions. I'm like, "Okay, guess what's happening in that scenario?" And they'll guess. No, and no one gets it because they're just guessing. They're taking stabs in the dark, and that's all they're asking. But if they say, "So, Leslie, tell us what's happening." Well, all of a sudden the floodgates open, and I'm gonna tell them what happened. Well, that's what we have to do in conversations. It's just that people are very uncomfortable with that question because you give up control. Now, as the questioner, you basically said, like, "Well, tell me what's happening." And now you might actually have to listen. And they may tell you much more than you need to know or want to know. But now you're learning things that you didn't know. And that's the key to a question. If you already know the answer, then you've either made an assumption or you might really know the answer if you're just asking a factual type of thing. But you don't know it from their perspective. And in order to invite people, you need to start questions with what or how versus is or does. And that's like just a quick tip. If you replace is and does by how and what, you will learn what you don't know.
I love that. I'm right. Those are that's solid. Those are great gems. And another it comes to mind again is building trust, asking great
Yes.
questions. Sometimes people are not comfortable with answering questions to begin with. So some of this takes time, I would imagine, to develop
Absolutely.
these relationships with your colleagues in the community or even at a job site where we're working with other trades and other companies. And you might only have an interaction with a person once a week. And
Sure.
really needs to be quality because it's the same goal is in mind to finish that project in a timely and effective manner, and, and not to be taken advantage of, but to be assertive, and I feel like it's a little bit of that. There's some gas clutch brake things going on
Sure.
with, conversations like this to build trust and quality relationships in these tactics.
It's really this issue of like, you have to dare to ask or dare to disagree. And that can be very uncomfortable. There's plenty of teams that I've met with. I'm like, well, why didn't everyone bring this up? Well, yeah, but no one else was asking. So I figured it must be the best way of doing it. And there's the again, it goes back to depending on the culture of the team or the workplace or the entire company, that to raise an issue or to question something is not welcome, which completely goes against innovation and exploring new ideas and having different ideas. But that happens because people want that sure thing. They're under that kind of pressure that I have to know what's gonna work perfectly. And most of us know there's no such thing as perfect. We
Yeah.
just have to do it.
Well, and I would say too, especially in construction, in any trade really, is to build that trust. You want to have that person be able to talk to you in the future. And there might
Yes.
be an opportunity where you might have to work with that person again in a year or in 6 months
Yep.
or every day. And what you're saying is it's really developing a nice foundation for you to have an effective relationship or friendship or a colleague interaction that is successful. And really, and we are going to segue into the next strategy where it would be state your expectations and say what you want and need. And I feel that that's an important attribute to fit in there as we're dealing with the listening and the pausing and asking great questions. So, what's your take on that?
So I get this a lot. A manager will say to me, my team is never like, producing what I want. So what do you want? And they'll have this long list. So what was the communication about it? And they'll just look at me blank faced. Well, they know we've been working together for years. I said, okay, well, maybe they don't know. That's why you didn't get it. They don't assume they're just being defiant because they don't wanna deliver. If you don't discuss it and share and confirm, how does anyone know what it is? And it is what I've mentioned earlier, there's a lot of one-way communication going on and not a lot of verbal, actually talking to each other and saying, "Hey, this is what I think the project should be. This is what I'm thinking that of when we can finish. This is what I think the resources may need to be." Go look at think about it and come back to me. That come back, if it's in an email, they never do because they think, well, he or she or they told me what they wanted, and the only way to do well is to deliver what they asked. They don't welcome feedback because they'll be like, "Oh, you mean you can't get it done by Friday? I already promised I could get it done by Friday." And there's a lot of that pressure of people like preservation within the organization and not really honoring team and forgetting that teams that work well together, their success multiplies many more than the members on their team. But people fear that, and they're much more out for themselves, and I'm sure we've all been on a team like that, that it's not really a team, that each individual is almost stepping on others to achieve what they need to achieve, and they forget that, if we all win, like, we all win.
That I've had more of the other where the stepping on.
Mhm.
And I think too that often people are afraid to lose their jobs. So it's they need to pay their mortgage, their bills, and if they assert themselves or proactively ask you a question that might bring up a point, maybe it's a safety issue. Maybe they're afraid
Mhm.
if they bring up a safety issue on a job site, their
Yes.
general manager, their superintendent, "Why did you say that to that person?" So there's a whole lot of stuff going on behind the scenes where if you, again, can foster a trusting communicative relationship, whether it's an employee to employee, peer to peer, or manager to employee, or vice versa, it's really important to stay consistent because we all do want the same thing, mostly when we're on a project, whatever industry. And to be able to really rest our head at night and know that we've done a nice job in contributing to our peers and our effectiveness as a team and the bottom line to the company. It all kind of ties in there.
Right.
So, and bottom line, I would say that a lot of managers are really concerned about that because if you've not got the trust or culture and the value and belief system in place in that company, it's really hard to have it kind of go downhill and be effective in that direction too.
The huge opportunity is remembering that, especially when we mention managers, just because someone was great at whatever their core responsibilities were, That doesn't mean they're going to be a great manager. It means there might be potential. But we have to give them the tools. And that's what this whole conversation really comes down to with conflict management, communication, even negotiation. We just go by what we know, and
Mhm.
there's a lot we don't know. And we need to learn it. It's not things that we typically learned in our earlier education. Training and continuing training
Yeah,
is so important. It doesn't have to be boring. There's so many opportunities now. And like I said, I practice my own, facilitation and speaking by running a monthly breakfast club that I've been running for, I think it's over 18 years right now. With that, they know, I'm always telling them, you teach me everything I need to know in the complicated and more difficult situations because we have to practice it and make it new habits because our old habits aren't always the best on a job, in a workplace where there's difficulties and tension
yeah,
and opportunities. We see it all as negative and blame, and there's a lot of opportunity to
so
share
many.
and innovate.
Absolutely. Opportunities that's especially in the construction industry, the technology industry and beyond. And I think you touched on this last strategy earlier where say you don't know when you don't know. Give yourself permission to not know the subject matter in what might be asked of you or in your environment. Do your research or say you just don't know. And
Yeah.
I think that really adds again a confidence and value to you that people can respect and remember those interactions with them that you're not going to answer just to answer. So, uh,
And
great.
to relate it to construction, I can tell you that there was one vendor, I called him first every time I had a project. I didn't even figure out, like, is he able to do it or not? Because he more often said no to me because he always said no when he couldn't do the job. And the other, vendors and big contractors, I'd call up, explain my project, and the answer was always yes. They wouldn't say not just the "I don't know" part, but when they didn't have the capacity to do something. And that's something I really learned that if I don't have the capacity right now, I have to say that, like,
Yep.
say no.
Yep.
So it's that combination of being able to say, "I don't know," and also know, "Oh, I actually can't do that right
And it's mature.
now." Yes.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's back to trust, like you said.
yes.
Trust is the foundation.
Well, and we've spoken of the 5 goals. I know there's likely 20 or so more that you can carry on and teach us, and I can't wait to keep my eye on you. You're one of my highlights that I have found on LinkedIn, and your topic
Thank
and
you.
expertise really caught my attention and it resonated, so much. So I just wanna just thank you for all of that, and our topic, really the goal is to create solutions. Like anything in life, the more you address difficult situations, the more you're going to get a better result. And I really agree with that so much. Even if it's a little awkward, you're going to be tackling these conversations and you're going to be creating positive outcomes and or at least you tried. And I feel that that's towards a healthier and more open workplace. I think that if there's effort and really a good common ground and a trusted foundation, I feel that the sky is the limit. And so, just great advice. Is there anything else that you want to share with us, Leslie? Because I've got something that I want to share about you, and
Ooh,
that is coming soon. But I wanted to make sure that we covered anything that you want to add in here before I segued into our conclusion.
I would just say that here we are in LinkedIn and remembering that there really I know I love sharing. There's no reason for me not to share. I'll share my tips, I'll share my strategies, but people do ask, like, well, why are you doing that? You're giving everything away. No, I'm not. I'm giving tips and strategies that you may be able to implement on your own, and I hope you do. And obviously, I'm here when you can't for more. And the engagement on LinkedIn, I've met people like you, Kevin,
Mhm.
and so many others. Brian's here. Chuck, I don't know, so I'm looking forward to meeting you. And Holly, I mentioned earlier, and Scott, and whoever else is listening in. We have a tremendous opportunity to build our communities here and intersect and meet people and engage with them that we would have never met otherwise. So, and John just chimed in. Uh, I just look forward to more of that. And whoever wants to connect with me or just follow and send a DM, I'm available for tips and strategies. That's what I'm here for.
Awesome. And you've got coming soon the conflict tune-up and online learning. Tell us a little bit about that and how people can get involved or learn more about this new product that you're going to be launching here soon.
Yeah. So by the end of March, I'm going to launch the conflict tune-up. It's basically what you've all asked for. Not all of you, but many of you have asked for, where it'll be just compact with impact. You're going to fill out a survey, give me some background information, and then we're going to have a Zoom meetup to create an action plan to address that conflict. And of course, I've dealt with enough conflicts over the last few decades. So I I know what questions to ask to get the information and make it really compact, but with impact. And then later this year, I am going to be doing much more online courses. Some of them will be more interactive than others. Some will be recorded. And the whole point is I've been teaching for more than 20 years. So I'm going to take all those lessons and this topic and get some of it on easier ways to access it in in short bites or whatever you want, all of them or pieces of it. So that'll be later this year.
Well, I'd love to have you back to talk about how things are going with that, and I'm just so proud of you, and it's just been such an honor to connect with you and learn more about managing conflict because it's something that we can all learn, trust me, and I just wanted to say if anybody wants to get a hold of Leslie or myself, we are obviously on LinkedIn. You can go to our pages and just underneath our profile picture are contact links that you can learn how to connect with us on various formats. And, or you can send us a personalized DM that we would love to hear from you. And please share your feedback if there's anything that you want to know more of. Obviously, Leslie is here to talk specifically about conflict, and I'm here to really support that. And again, I would just bravo to you and Leslie and all that you've done in helping support people in conflict resolution and handling difficult situations in the workplace. And again, thank you for your time.
Oh, and thank you for having me. And I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you, everyone, for being here. And I'm sorry I can't deliver bagels through the screen because I know Scott wants them because, of course, New
Mhm.
York has the best bagels.
We might have to go to New York and get those bagels, you and me, Scott. So again, Leslie, have a great day. Have
You
a
too.
really productive week and looking forward to connecting with you again soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.